Hi everyone, my name is Benno. Welcome to this introduction video to the 3D animation and modeling software Blender. Blender is a very powerful tool, and 3D modeling as a skill takes years to master. So together in this video, I'd just like to introduce you a little bit to what Blender actually is being used for, some of the basic features, and get you started. One of the main use areas of Blender is of course the creation of 3D models, and the process that we can see here being demonstrated is called sculpting. This is a trailer for the Netflix show called Next Gen, which to a large degree was actually made using Blender, showing the potential of the tool and just how much you can reach with it. Blender has a huge amount of tools, for example this very intricate and powerful simulation creator. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here and start at the beginning. So just go to the website blender.org and download any version of Blender. Now booting up Blender, you're gonna be greeted with this quick setup screen, and we can just leave everything as is. The settings are good. We want your preferred language, of course. Then the shortcuts should be on Blender. That's my recommended key shortcut set. We want to select with left. And the theme obviously should be Blender Dark because everything else would be heresy. Great. Next, let's have a look at the window that we see and some of the buttons and areas that I like to highlight first. First, let's have a look at the bar of different kinds of environments that we have all the way in the top. Currently, we are in Layout. And this is basically the area where you're gonna assemble your 3D models, put them all where they should be, and manage your objects. On the right, we have the scene collection. This is all the objects which are currently in your scene. For example, we have the cube here. I can left click on it here or in the scene collection to select it. We have our virtual camera that we can use to set up the direction that the scene is going to be rendered from. And we have a basic light source, so we have some light in our scene. So in layout mode, I can select my cube and then either click on the move tool here to get the move handle. And on one of the arrows, for example, I can slide my cube here on the x-axis or on the y-axis or on the z-axis, like that. Or I can use the shortcut for moving, which would be G for grab. And then I can move my cube around like this. Let's go back to the selection tool here, and then select the cube and go to the modeling workspace. So this here is the area where we can actually change the 3D model. So now the cube is a polygon model, a mesh, so it has a vertices, and in this view I can select one of the vertices and then also press G for grab to move that vertex around. So modeling is for individual object property changing of the shape of the vertices of the polygons. And the layout mode is to move the entire object and assemble a scene together. Next, let's talk about the mode that you're currently in. That would be this little box here. And currently I am in object mode. That means I have tools available for object manipulation. If I go into modeling workspace, this automatically changes into edit mode, which gives me a selection of tools to edit vertices and polygons and such. These two modes can be changed around, so I can change this into object mode here, for example, but for the beginning, I recommend that you in modeling always keep the edit mode on and in layout keep the object mode on. Great. Lastly, let's have a look at the area to the right here, where you can have a set of properties which are object specific or scene specific. So for example, here the object properties are, among others, the transform. that show the location of the object. And if I go and drag here, I can change the object position as well over here. You can also always delete any objects by just selecting it and pressing the delete key. Or you can add a new object by going here to the add menu, mesh, for example, if we want a new cube, and go to cube. And there we go, now we have our cube back, or rather it's a new cube actually. If you're on a keyboard that doesn't have a delete key, you can also just right click here in the scene collection and select delete. Next, let's talk about how to navigate the scene. For this, you want to press middle mouse button on Windows or 2 fingers on a Mac trackpad. And then you can rotate the camera with the mouse like this. If you press Shift while doing this, you can pan the camera like so. The little circle in the middle that you've been seeing all this time, that is red and white striped. That's called the 3D cursor, and it's used, for example, to position objects in Blender. You can move that by pressing Shift and right mouse button. You can put that over here, for example, and then if I go and add a new object, let's add a sphere, it will be appearing where the 3D cursor is. Blender, of course, has a huge amount of shortcuts and ways to select things and manipulate things, and I don't think we should overdo it in the first video, but just to show you, for example, one of the other ways on how you can select things in Blender. One of the nice intuitive selection methods is, for example, Shift S, where you get one of these wheels. There's a lot of them for all kinds of different tool sets. In this case, this is the cursor wheel, where we can do different things with the 3D cursor. And for example, here we can move it back to the world origin. Voila. Great. Now let's move our attention to the little view selection area on the top right. There we can move our view and align it with different axes. So I can align my view with the x-axis, with the y-axis, or from the top with the z-axis. This is also moving us into orthographic view, which means there's no longer any perspective distortion. Right? You can see that by this cube not having any more perspective properties anymore. This is incredibly useful if I want to align objects with each other. So let's go ahead and move into right orthographic view on the x-axis and now add a cone. So there would be add here, mesh, and then I'm going to select the cone. And now I'm going to press G for grab again to get the move tool. And I can move my cone here to put it on top of the cube, like that. Then I can look at it from the front, that would be the y-axis, right? And see, okay, it aligns also here. And now if I want to go out of the orthographic view again, I just press middle mouse button, or that's 2 fingers on the trackpad, and then I go back into perspective view and I can look at my wonderful cone hat here in perspective. As a last thing for this video, let's now just explore the other manipulation tools a little bit, scaling and rotation. And for this, I first gonna delete my cube here and add us a little sphere again. We're gonna make a little figure. So let's multi-select 2 objects now. The way you do that is by shift clicking on the other object you want to select. And now I'm gonna press G to move and Z to limit that movement on the Z axis. So now if I move my mouse around, it only moves on the Z axis alone. Let's add a body to this now. For this, I go to add, mesh, make another cube, and I'll scale it down. So press S to scale and move the mouse a little closer to scale it down. You can also use the scale tool on the left here if you prefer that. Then I will press S again to scale it vertically. So the Z-axis, that means I press the Z key to limit the scaling to the Z-axis, and now I can scale like this. If your mouse ever moves out of the screen during these operations, you can always just move the mouse a little closer and then do it again. So S and then Z to scale only on the Z-axis. And now I can make myself a body. Wonderful. So now let's add some arms to the figure. The arm should be extending left and right. That would be the x-axis, so the red one here. That means I will rotate a little bit with the middle mouse button or the two fingers to look from the front. And now add myself another mesh, a cube. Scale it down a little with the S key and then press S and X to scale on the x-axis like that. And now I'll just move it a little bit upwards with G and Z. So right over here. Then I'll move it to the left. We're gonna make that arm first. So that would be G and X. Move it over here. Now I'll rotate it a little. So we are cheering. Hooray. That would be R for rotate and then Y to rotate on the Y-axis only. So we're gonna do it sort of like this. And now I'll duplicate the arm with Shift and D. So we have the other arm. Can move that over here. And now I'll rotate it with R and then Z to rotate on the Z-axis and kind of flip it around like this. There we go. Now we have one happy little Blender guy. That concludes this video. We learned about Blender, its applications, its basic user interface, some of the navigation tools for the scenes, and also how to manipulate the objects on the basic level with moving, rotation, and scaling. We created this figure now of individual parts. You can see in the scene collection there's a whole bunch of cubes there. And this is actually not what you usually want to do. If you create one figure, you want that to be just one object, and it should also have one complete whole. Right now all these objects are sort of intersecting with each other and sticking into each other, and that's not that great. So in the next video we're gonna explore how to 3D model by manipulating vertices and polygons. As a final little treat for this video, I have a cheat sheet for you that you can copy, save as a screenshot or something like that. And it contains all of the actions that in my experience are required for basic 3D modeling tasks. That's it from me. It was nice to have you all here, and I hope to see you in the next video.